Greetings metalheads and welcome to No Nonsense Metal Reviews. I'm George and today I'm going to be talking about another criminally underrated album. Another album that I feel just does not get the love and attention that it deserves. So today's underrated album comes from one of the most well-known, well-known and highly regarded death metal bands, old school death metal bands to have emerged from the Tampa, Florida scene, from the US death metal scene, originating in the late 80s with their first album, their debut album, coming out in 1989, being Slowly We Rot. They really did tear the scene apart, blew the metal world wide open, in my opinion anyway, with a really impactful, outright, groovy, stomping death metal album. And of course, they really did carry on a brilliant succession. A couple of years later, I believe it was, we then had, if I can get the album booklet out, we had the absolutely stunning Cause of Death. Another legendary death metal album and an absolute go-to, a fan favourite. Of course, these albums all produced by the legendary Scott Burns at Morrisound Studios, Tampa, Florida. Absolutely legendary material, and their winning streak just continued. It just carried on with, I believe this was 1992, yes. The End Complete. Absolutely glorious stuff. Freaking love this album. It's an absolute classic, a real kind of doom injection to this album, as opposed to Cause of Death, which was a lot more in the death metal category, not really nearly as much death doom leaning. Then we had another good album. I do feel that it's underrated, but it's not quite as underrated as the next article that we're going to talk about. We had World Demise as well, another solid album there. But the really underrated one, in my opinion, is this. This is Back from the Dead. This was released in 1997, and this album is an absolute bludgeoning death metal bulldozer. But I just feel that this is really overlooked. This is a really underrated album, especially when you take, and I can understand why actually, when you take albums like that, first 3 or 4 albums, those are brilliant classic death metal albums. They are well renowned. They are albums that are held in very high regard. And then we also had some absolute triumphs later on as well, with Inked in Blood, which was essentially like the comeback album for Obituary. And unfortunately, it doesn't say the year of release here, frustratingly, and I can't quite recall off the top of my head when this came out. 2014, bloody hell. That's actually longer ago than I thought. Nearly 10 years ago. Crikey, I remember going and buying that one. Yes, then we got 1,000 Ways to Die, which is another good release. Then we had that cracking self-titled album, which was 2017. Absolutely loved that album. Really, really cracking. The absolutely stunning new album as well, from last year, in fact, or from last year, this year, 2023. Dying of Everything, which is absolutely glorious. Freaking love that album. That is so definitely going to be in my top albums of the year list. But because you've got such a heavy and strong early catalogue and also a latter catalogue, I can understand why Back from the Dead, kind of sitting in that awkward middle period, why this is overlooked so frequently and so easily. But this is a seriously groovy album. This album is clearly heavily influenced by a lot of the kind of the groove metal stuff that we had coming out in the late 90s. Influenced a whole lot of bands. That kind of groove thing was infecting bands like Sepultura. It was infecting Napalm Death. It was infecting everyone, pretty much. 6 Feet Under. A lot of bands were being heavily influenced, and I think that maybe is what happened here. That Obituary were influenced by the whole groove thing, which is why you get tracks like Threatening Skies and By the Light, those opening 2 in particular, which are real kind of groovy death metal stompers. They've got killer riffs. There is still a kind of death doom vibe throughout this album. However, tracks like those first two, Threatening Skies and By the Light, they are really showcasing a whole lot of groove there and stomp. Inverted, another solid Obituary death metal track. Platonic Disease, that's just good old Obituary in my opinion. That just sounds like solid Obituary. Download and Rewind, both tracks, they sound a bit more modern in my opinion, but they've got some killer grooves, some really crushingly heavy riffs. Of course, drumming wise, you've got the legendary Don Tardy on drums, absolutely crushing it. I mentioned the full band actually because you've got Alan West, legendary Alan West on lead guitars. You've got Trevor Perez on rhythm guitar. You've got Frank Watkins on bass, and you've got John Tardy on vocals. John sounds fantastic. All the band sound fantastic. In fairness, absolutely brilliant musicianship. As I say, Download and Rewind, they sound a bit more modern, sound a bit more up to date, but more for the time. I mean, sounds good. Album highlight, no doubt at all. Track 7, Feed on the Weak. That is a death doom, stomping, smashing, hammering masterpiece. Absolutely glorious stuff. Love that one. Then we've got Lockdown, again, kind of in the groovy death metal stomping vein, but still really good. There's no doubt at all about that. Pressure Point as well. That's got a bit of more kind of attitude and aggression to it, but it's heavy, it's crushing stuff. And the title track, Back from the Dead, that is death metal. That is good old Obituary style death metal. Absolutely love that particular number. What you do get in this particular form, because this is a reissue from 2018, you get that bonus, you get that track Obituary remix, which is essentially some absolutely despicable, god-awful hip-hop version of By the Light, and I absolutely cannot listen to it. It sounds bloody awful in my opinion on this truly astounding album. This is a really solid album. No, it might not be my favourite Obituary album, but it's seriously overlooked and seriously underrated. Check out By the Light. That is a real death metal groovy. It's got great guitar tone, and as I say, John Tardy's vocals throughout the album really solid. But By the Light's got a really good kind of gritty death metal tone to it. Platonic Disease, another death metal masterpiece. Feed on the Weak, which is my album highlight, as I've mentioned, and the title track Back from the Dead, which is a nasty, putrid death metal standout. Absolutely love it. Obituary have been such a reliable band over the years. From the albums that I have, and I do have a couple of gaps, I can't quite remember what they are. I think Executioner's Return and one other, but I have a couple of gaps. But I would say they from what I've heard of their catalogue, they don't have a bad album. Some albums a little bit stronger than others, but actually they do not have a bad album. They have a very reliable catalogue, and I would honestly argue that this album is a bit of a gem. This is a bit of a masterpiece in my opinion. This is solid Obituary. Back from the Dead, check it out. If you like good groovy death metal, if you're not familiar with Obituary, then seriously need to rectify that. You will probably want to check out some of those earlier and latter albums first, really get yourself acquainted with some of their most excellent material. If you like bands like 6 Feet Under, then you're absolutely going to love Obituary, of course. Such a reliable band, but check it out if you've never heard it. If you have, what are your thoughts and opinions on Back from the Dead? Do you agree that it's an underrated album? Do you think it's a hidden gem? Let me know. Interested to hear thoughts and opinions of others, of course. So thank you very much for watching, my friends. Do check out Back from the Dead. Do check out Obituary. Thank you very much for watching, of course. Feel free to like and subscribe as always. It's very, very much appreciated. Do take care, my friends, and stay heavy.